Over the past few seasons on Project Dreamboat, I've seen, and you've seen, a bunch of traditional well transom to bracket conversions. Now, I've seen them even before I was involved with this show, but I've never had the opportunity to do actual hard analysis of the before and after conversion and compare the numbers and see just exactly what you've got to lose or gain if you do a conversion such as this. Now, this season, I was contacted by Scott Antonius. Scott has a regulator with a traditional well-style transom, and he's about to do a conversion from that style to an Armstrong bracket on his boat. Outside of the show entirely, Scott contacted us as a fan of the show and a reader of the magazine and said, you might like to compare before and after on my boat, and I'd offer the boat to you and we can look at the numbers and go from there. As Florida Sportsman's boating editor, I felt this was a chance to really learn some valuable information about the before and after analysis and, get some numbers that I could actually tell people about at the end of the day. Now, the way we got our results was very simple. We ran a series of tests and took a baseline average of the numbers that we got. We started out with time to plane hole shot. Now, this wasn't very scientific. Basically, in a nutshell, we started the boat going with the tide with the trim tabs all the way up and tried to get on plane as quickly as we possibly could. Now, by going directly to sunset right away, this boat was able to plane in just over 7 seconds. Now, our next test was what speed was going to be necessary to keep the boat on plane. In other words, as I throttled back, at what point would the boat fall off the plane and want to squat? What we found was the little regulator needed a speed of just over about 23.5 miles an hour to stay on plane. This was both motors running at 2,900 RPMs and burning just under 14 gallons an hour. Now, the number that most people are really concerned with is how fast is this boat going to go and what kind of fuel numbers are you going to get to? So we decided we would test it at 3 very common ranges to run. We're going to test the boat at 3,500 RPMs, 4,000 RPMs, and 4,500 RPMs. This would be the most common scenario for speed that you would run offshore while you're underway. Now, sitting squarely in the middle of these 3 numbers, we found 4,000 RPMs to be probably the most comfortable range to cruise at, offering us just under 37 miles an hour cruise speed at 1.37 miles per gallon. Now, a few other numbers that we wanted to look at was really just a matter of something that I'm going to say is probably subjective. Okay, I wanted to see how the boat felt, how it handled underway in various conditions, a fishing scenario, at the dock, at the boat ramp. How did the boat perform overall in kind of an intangible way, something that you just have to know inside of you, okay? So we tried a few different tests. We ran the boat. We ran the boat and maneuvered around. We tried to do figure eights in the boat. We cut around buoys in the boat. I would say on a whole, this boat ran pretty good before the conversion. One thing I did notice was that the engines did get underwater when we started, but in the big picture, the boat really handled maneuverability-wise and everything. It didn't have very many bad habits. It felt pretty good. After I got done this morning with Scott and the boat, I took plenty of notes and sent Scott on his way. Now, he left with the boat to get the bracket installed, and I went to set about crunching the numbers in my own head. A few weeks passed and Scott called me up informing me that the job was finished and he was ready to put the boat in the water and let us see how it was going to perform with the new bracket. We met Scott at the boat ramp in Port Salerno, and one of the first things I noticed about this boat was it looked a lot cooler with the bracket on it. Now, it's kind of hard to say why, but just this boat seemed to stretch out a little bit and the boat looked a lot happier with the added length. I mean, something about it, it definitely looked nicer. We started out underway to get to the spot where we did the original test and started right out to shoot with our hole shot test. Now, our before test showed this boat took about just over 7 seconds to plane, and with the new bracket installed, we were right at about 5 seconds to plane. Taking 2 seconds off the hole shot was really a noticeable improvement, and more importantly, one of the things that I noticed too was the added flotation from the bracket. These engines went nowhere near the water. Before, the engines were half underwater when we took off, and again when we slowed down, and this phenomenon was completely gone with the addition of the bracket. This was a noticeable improvement. Our next test was what's the minimum speed we could run the boat at and stay on plane. Now, before Scott added the bracket to this boat, the boat needed 23.5 miles an hour to get up on plane at 2,900 RPMs. With the addition of the bracket, the speed number dropped to 21.75 miles an hour at 2,800 RPMs. And the fuel numbers at both of these levels were virtually unchanged. But the ability to plane at a slower speed is going to enable you to get from A to B a lot more comfortably on a rough day without the boat wanting to hunt for a high-speed RPM. Now, once again, as in the before, we tested the boat at 3 different very common cruising RPMs. We noticed both an improvement of speed and fuel economy across the board at all 3 of these ranges, with the most noticeable being at 4,000 RPMs, where the before numbers showed us 36.8 miles per hour at 1.37 miles a gallon. And the after numbers showing us an improvement to 38.1 miles an hour and 1.56 miles per gallon. Now, is it a really dramatic change in all these numbers? Not necessarily, but the numbers are definitely there and they don't lie, okay? You're gonna see better fuel economy and better performance from a math standpoint. How much money are you gonna spend at the pump? The guy that owns this boat that did the conversion is definitely gonna realize some savings. But more importantly to me, the changes that I noticed in the boat were this boat handled infinitely better with the bracket. Now, when I say infinitely better, this is gonna be something that's hard for me to quantify to you other than the fact that it's just the feel of the boat. The boat floated higher in the water, the stern end of the boat didn't squat, the engines never went in the water, but just overall the boat to me felt happier having this bracket on there. It was much more maneuverable, it was much easier to handle at the dock, it was much more maneuverable in close quarters. The boat backed better, it went forward better, it did figure eights and turns better, just overall a better performing boat. When I was finished with the boat, I absolutely think Scott got his money's worth.
Notice it's way more responsive. The steering is more responsive. The boat reacts faster. It planes off faster. I think it rides a little bit more level, and it's burning less fuel. And easy to get on and off. The other boat, the motors were on the transom. It was very hard to get on the back of the boat. Now we have the dive ladder, which is right off the side of the bracket here, and it makes it much easier to get on and off the boat. It was well worth the investment, and the boat runs better, and thumbs up. Awesome.
At the end of our test, I was glad I had the opportunity to do a real before and after comparison of this boat. Now, is a bracket gonna be the silver bullet fix-all for every single boat out there? Maybe not, but for this regulator, I know Scott was really happy and he's quickly gonna realize that his investment was not in vain. This boat just ran better and he knows it.